Hello, welcome back everybody. We are in Chapter 2, Section 2, Early Exploration, beginning on page 34, American Diary. In 1492, Christopher Columbus led 90 sailors on a voyage into the unknown. As the voyage dragged on, the sailors grew quarrelsome. Columbus wrote, quote, "I am told that if I persist in going onward, the best course of action will be to throw me into the sea some night," close quote. Then on the morning of October 12th, a cannon fired from the ship Pinta, indicating that land had been sighted. At dawn, Columbus left his ship, the Santa Maria, and went ashore. Page 35, seeking new trade routes. Main idea: Portugal took the lead in finding a sea route to India. History and you. What do you consider a long trip? A few hours on an airplane or a few days in a car? Read to learn about the long sea voyages that Portuguese ships made to find a sea route to India. Columbus believed he had arrived in the Indies, or islands located southeast of China. Unfortunately, Columbus was wrong. The maps that Columbus and the first European explorers used did not include the Americas. They showed three continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, merged in a gigantic landmass bordered by oceans. Some explorers thought the western Atlantic and eastern Pacific Oceans ran together to form what they called the Ocean Sea. No one realized that another huge landmass was missing from the maps. They also did not realize that the oceans were as large as they are. Columbus sailed for Spain, but Portugal was the first European power to explore the boundaries of the known world. Because Portugal lacked a Mediterranean port, it could not share in the trade between Asia and Europe. The country's rulers wanted to find a new route to China and India. The Portuguese also hoped to find a more direct way to get West African gold. The gold traveled by caravan across the desert to North Africa and then by ship across the Mediterranean. Portuguese traders needed a better route. Early Portuguese voyages. Prince Henry of Portugal helped lay the groundwork for the era of exploration that was beginning. In about 1420, he set up a center for exploration at Sarges on the southwestern tip of Portugal, where endeth land and where beginneth sea. Known as Henry the Navigator, the prince never intended to become an explorer himself. Instead, he planned the voyages and then analyzed the reports that his crews brought home. At Sarges, Prince Henry began his school of navigation. There, astronomers, geographers, and mathematicians shared their knowledge with Portuguese sailors and shipbuilders. When each new voyage brought back new information, Henry's expert mapmakers updated the charts. As Portuguese ships moved south along the coast of West Africa, they traded for gold and ivory and established a number of trading posts in the region. Because of its abundance of gold, the area came to be known as the Gold Coast. In the mid-1400s, Portuguese traders began buying enslaved people there as well. King John II of Portugal launched new efforts to realize the Portuguese dream of a trading empire in Asia. If the Portuguese could find a sea route around Africa, they could trade directly with India and China. In the 1480s, the king urged Portuguese sea captains to explore farther south along the African coast. Bartholomew Diaz. In 1487, King John sent Bartholomew Diaz to explore the southernmost part of Africa and from there to sail northeast into the Indian Ocean. Diaz set out from Lisbon with two small caravels and a slower supply ship. The expedition was also assigned some of Portugal's best pilots. They sailed for days. After passing the mouth of the Orange River in South Africa, Diaz ran into a fierce storm that lasted nearly 2 weeks. The strong winds carried him southward, off course and out of sight of land. When the winds finally died down, Diaz steered east and then north until he found land again. Diaz realized that he had sailed past the southernmost point of Africa, called a cape because it projects into the sea. Diaz charted a course back home. On the return journey, Diaz passed the cape again. He wrote that he had been around the Cape of Storms. On learning of Diaz's discovery, King John renamed this southern tip of land. He called it the Cape of Good Hope. The king hoped that the passage around Africa might lead to a new route to India. Vasco da Gama. The first Portuguese voyages to India were made years later. In July 1497, after much preparation, Vasco da Gama set out from Portugal with 4 ships. Da Gama did little coast hugging of Africa. Instead, his ships made a huge semicircular sweep through the Atlantic Ocean. At one point during the voyage, Da Gama was closer to what is today Brazil than he was to Africa. It is said that Da Gama made this unusual maneuver to reach currents that would help him around the Cape of Good Hope, safely. During that huge sweep of the Atlantic, Da Gama was out of sight of land for 96 days. After rounding the Cape on November 22nd, Da Gama visited cities along the coast of East Africa. Along the way, he met an Arab pilot who knew the Indian Ocean well. With the pilot's help, Da Gama sailed on to India. He reached the port of Calicut in May of 1498, completing the long-awaited eastern sea route to Asia, the Portuguese trading empire. Events moved quickly after that. Less than 6 months after Da Gama's return home, a fleet of 13 ships left Lisbon bound for the east. In command of this fleet was Pedro Alvarez Cabral. With him, several captains, including Bartholomew Diaz. Cabral followed Da Gama's route. His course, however, swung so wide around Africa that he reached Brazil, where he explored some of the coastline. Cabral claimed the land for his king and sent one of his ships back to Portugal with the good news while he continued on to India. Cabral gave Portugal a stake in the Americas. Cabral returned home from India with cargoes of spices, porcelain, and other goods. Other Portuguese fleets repeated Cabral's success, and Portugal established its first permanent forts in India. Portuguese fleets began to make annual voyages to India. There, cargoes made their Portuguese capital of Lisbon the marketplace of Europe. Reading check, analyzing. What was the significance of the voyages of Diaz and Da Gama? Columbus crosses the Atlantic. Main idea. After Christopher Columbus reached the Americas, Spain and Portugal divided the world's unexplored regions. History and you. Do you like traveling to new places? Read to learn about the European exploration of the Americas. Christopher Columbus had a different plan for reaching Asia. He planned to get there by sailing west. Born in Genoa, Italy in 1451, Columbus became a sailor for Portugal. He had traveled as far north as the Arctic Circle and as far south as the Gold Coast. In the 1400s, most educated people believed the world was round. A more difficult matter was determining its size. Columbus was among those who based their estimates of the Earth's size on the work of Ptolemy. An ancient Greek astronomer, Columbus believed Asia was about 2,760 miles from Europe, a voyage of about 2 months by ship. Ptolemy, however, underestimated the size of the world. The Viking voyages. Several centuries before Columbus, northern Europeans called Vikings had sailed to North America. In the AD 800s and 900s, Viking ships visited Iceland and Greenland and established settlements. According to Norse sagas or traditional stories, a Viking sailor named Leif Erikson explored a land west of Greenland about the year AD 1000. It was known as Vinland. Other Norse sagas describe failed attempts by the Vikings to settle in Vinland, which historians believe was North America. Archaeologists have found the remains of a Viking settlement in Newfoundland. No one is sure what other parts of North America the Vikings explored. The Viking voyages to other lands were not well known. Europeans did not discover the Americas until Columbus made his great voyage. Spain backs Columbus. For most of the 1400s, Spanish monarchs devoted or committed their energy to driving the Muslims out of Spain. The last Muslim kingdom in Spain fell in 1492. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain could then focus on their goals. The Spanish were watching the seafaring and trading successes of neighboring Portugal with envy. They too wanted the riches of Asian trade. Columbus needed a sponsor to finance his project of a westward voyage to Asia. He visited many European courts looking for support. After years of frustration, he finally found a sponsor in Spain. Queen Isabella, a devout Christian, was finally persuaded by her husband's minister of finance to support the expedition for 2 reasons. First, Columbus promised to bring Christianity to any lands where he found. Second, if he found a way to Asia, Spain would become wealthy through the trade that would open up. The Queen promised Columbus a share of any riches gained from lands he discovered on his way to Asia. Columbus's first voyage. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set out from Palos, Spain. He had 2 small ships, the Nina and Pinta, and a larger one, the Santa Maria. Columbus served as captain of the Santa Maria, his flagship. The 3 ships carried about 90 sailors and a 6-month supply of provisions. The small fleet stopped at the Canary Islands off the coast of West Africa for repairs and to stock up on supplies. Columbus then set out on the difficult voyage westward across unknown and mysterious stretches of the Atlantic Ocean. The ships had good winds, but rather a month at sea, the sailors began to worry. Columbus, however, was determined. He told the men, Quote, I made this voyage to go to the Indies, and I shall continue until I find them with God's help. To convince the crew that they had not traveled too far from home, Columbus altered or changed the distances in his ship's log. Tierra, tierra. On October 12, 1492, at 2 o'clock in the morning, a lookout shouted, Tierra, tierra, land, land. He had spotted a small island, part of the group of islands now called the Bahamas. Columbus went ashore, claimed the island for Spain, and named it San Salvador. Although he did not know it, Columbus had reached the Americas. Columbus explored the area for several months, convinced he had reached the East Indies, the islands off the coast of Africa. Today, the Caribbean islands are often referred to as the West Indies. Columbus called the local people Indians. He noted that they regarded the Europeans with wonder and often touched them to find out if they were flesh and bones like themselves. Columbus returned to Spain in triumph. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand received him with great honor and agreed to finance his future voyages to the lands in the West. Columbus earned the title of Admiral of the Ocean Sea. Columbus's later voyages. Columbus made 3 more voyages from Spain in 1493, 1498, and 1502. He explored the Caribbean islands off Hispaniola, present-day Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Jamaica. He also sailed along the coast of Central America and northern South America. He claimed the new lands for Spain and established settlements. Columbus, who mapped the coastline of Columbus also mapped the coastline of Central America. Later explorations made it clear that Columbus had not reached Asia at all. He had found a part of the globe that was unknown to Europeans, Asians, and Africans. In the following years, the Spanish explored most of the Caribbean region. In time, their voyages led to the establishment of the Spanish Empire in the Americas, dividing the world. Both Spain and Portugal wanted to protect their claims, and they turned to Pope Alexander VI for help. In 1493, the Pope drew a line of demarcation, an imaginary line running down the middle of the Atlantic from the North Pole to the South Pole. Spain was to control all lands to the west of the line. Portugal controlled all lands to the east of the line. Portugal, however, protested that the division favored Spain. As a result, in 1494, the two countries signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, an agreement to move the line farther west. The treaty divided the entire unexplored world between Spain and Portugal. Exploring America. After Columbus, other voyagers explored the Americas. In 1502, Amerigo Vespucci sailed along South America's coast. Vespucci concluded that South America was a continent, not part of Asia. European geographers soon began calling the continent America in honor of Amerigo Vespucci. Another Spaniard, Vasco Núñez de Balboa, heard stories of the great waters beyond the mountains of Panama in Central America. He hiked through the steamy rainforest until he reached the opposite coast. There in 1513, Balboa found a vast body of water, claiming it and the adjoining lands for Spain. Balboa was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean from the Americas, sailing around the world. In 1520, Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese seaman sailing for Spain, reached the southernmost tip of South America. He sailed through the stormy waters of a strait, or narrow sea passage, into the ocean Balboa had seen. The waters were so peaceful, Pacifico in Spanish, that Magellan named the ocean the Pacific. Although Magellan later died in the Philippine Islands, his crew continued west, arriving in Spain in 1522. They became the first known people to circumnavigate or sail around the world. Reading check. Why did Spain finance Columbus's voyage? Section 2, review. Vocabulary. Number 1, using complete sentences, define the following terms. Saga, devote, alter, line of demarcation, strait, circumnavigate. Main ideas. 2, identifying. What route did the Portuguese explorers follow to get to Asia? Which explorer arrived first? 3, describing. How did Spain and Portugal divide up the entire unexplored world? Critical thinking. 4, analyzing. How did Henry the Navigator further exploration? 5, persuasive writing. Write a paragraph explaining why Americans might celebrate Erickson Day rather than Columbus Day. Number 6, sequencing. Use a timeline like the one below to show when the following explorers carried out their journeys: Columbus, Erickson, Magellan, Balboa. Answer the essential question. Number 7, why did Spain and Portugal want to find a sea route to Asia? Okay, that wraps it up. Coakley out.